Hello everyone and welcome to this Groovy JMeter Tutorial Series. In this series, we will be learning Groovy so that we can handle the different scenarios in the JMeter. And this is our first tutorial, so we will learn what is Groovy and why we are using Groovy in the JMeter. So let's begin. So what is Groovy? So Groovy is basically a JVM based scripting language that enhances Java with simpler syntax. Now why we need to use the Groovy. So Groovy is used for test automation, scripting, and performance testing in JMeter. Now, what are the key features which make it different from other scripting languages? So basically, when we talk about this one, so we have some key features. So the first key feature is that it is simple and concise, means that you need to do a less code than Java. Secondly, it's dynamic and powerful, which supports closures, collection, and ridges. Then it's a high performance. So, and how it is high performing? Because it is compiled to the bytecode, making it faster than interpreted languages. Now we need to understand why we should use Groovy in JMeter when we can use the bean shell scripting as well, right? So you might have heard about bean shell when you're working with a JMeter, but why you should use the Groovy in the JMeter? That's the thing. So the first thing is that obviously the performance. So Groovy compiles to bytecode and runs faster. Then secondly, the Groovy is memory efficient, which means that it will use less RAM and CPU. Then it is JSR 2 to 3 compatible, means that you can write your code because it works with this particular samplers, right? And then better Java integration, we can call Java methods and libraries easily. Now let's go to the JMeter and write our very first code on this one. Now you need to go to the bin folder of the JMeter and go to this jmeter.bat. Just double click on this one and run this one and it will open the JMeter. And now what you need to do is that you need to go to this test plan, right click on this one, add thread group, and inside this thread group we will go here again, right click, add sampler and JSR2 to 3 sampler. Click on this one and here we'll be writing our script. So it's just like a hello world. Simply what you need to do is that you need to type log dot info and in the small brackets you need to type. So I'll say hello, welcome to Groovy. And if I run this one, it will ask to save this one, and but nothing happens because in order to see this, because we are logging this information, so this information needs to be logged somewhere. And in order to see this information, what you need to do is that you simply need to go to the options over here and open this log viewer and just scroll this up, and here what you need to do is that you need to go to this particular line. So here this is line 23, this one. So JSR sampler, hello, welcome to Groovy. Okay, and let me close this one. And what also you can do is that you can log the warning or errors as well for your test scripts in the JMeter. So simply what you need to do is that log dot warning. Okay, and similarly I'll say this is warning. Now why I'm logging this? Because this information will be really helpful when you are working with the scripts. Okay, and again I need to open this log viewer and I will clean this up and run this one again, and here we will scroll this up and here we need to find these lines. So hello, welcome to Groovy, and again this is warning. Now if I scroll this on the left side, here it says that this is a warning, this is not the information, right? And in a similar way, you can log the error, okay, which you're supposed to fix or you need to debug, right? And furthermore, what you can also do is that you can print the information in the console. So console means that when you launch the JMeter, this window will be open. So this is a console and there is no information available over here right now. Okay, so you want the information to be there. So simply I will say print ln and I will provide the string. This is on console. Okay, now clear this one again and run this one. And here, if I scroll up, you will see that these two information are there, but third one is not there, right? So if I go to this one, so this information is available in the console now. Furthermore, you can also go with the out dot print ln, and this information will also be printed in the console. Second string in console using out dot print ln. Let me clear this one and run this one. And again, you see that these informations are there in the log. And if I go here, you will see that this information got printed in the console here as well. Okay, so basically, if I summarize this particular tutorial, so what we have done is that we understood that what is Groovy, right, and how we can add the sampler and how we can log the information in the which we can see in the console or in the log viewer. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone and welcome to this Groovy JMeter Tutorial Series. In this particular tutorial, we will learn about JSR223 sampler in detail. So let's begin. The JSR223 sampler in the JMeter allows user to write the custom scripts in the multiple languages like Groovy, Bean Shell to enhance the test execution. It is widely used for the dynamic test cases, logic manipulation, and the performance optimization. Now you might be wondering that what is this JSR and what is this 223, right? So basically, if we talk about this one, so JSR stands for Java Specification Request. Now this specification request is a part of Java community process which is known as JCP to define new Java standards. Now when we talk about JSR 223, it specifically refers to a scripting for the Java platform, a specification which allows Java applications like JMeter to support multiple scripting languages within the Java environment. So that's why we are using this JSR 223 sampler while writing the Groovy scripts within the JMeter, right? I hope you got the point now. What is JSR 223 sampler? Now, why we need to use this? It executes custom scripts for the complex logic, provides better performance than Bean Shell sampler, supports multiple scripting languages, and Groovy is definitely recommended one. It enables dynamic test execution using variables, allows manipulation of request, response, and the test flow. So there's so multiple benefits of using this particular JSR 223 sampler. Now let's go to the JMeter, and inside the JMeter we will see the different options available in JSR 223 sampler. Now in JMeter, what we need to do is that we need to go to this test plan, right click on this one, go to add, go to thread group, Now inside this thread group, we'll right click again, add sampler, and then JSR223 sampler. Click on this one. Now you see that we have a multiple options over here. The multiple things: name, comments, then language, parameters, script file, file name. There are so many things here. So let's discuss these things one by one. So the first thing is the name over here. So you need to define a custom name. So for example, you have written a script to log some information. For example, you need to log user data, right? So log underscore or maybe log data or something like that, which actually tells you why you used this particular JSR223 sampler. Then comments are used to add a notes or the description about this script. So for example, if I change it to log data and here I say this script will use to log user information from sign up page. So this is just I randomly added a comments. So tomorrow if I open this one, I totally understand okay why I added this particular sampler and what is the purpose of using this script in my test plan. Okay. Now here's the scripting language. You can select the multiple languages we are using Groovy. So that's why we are by default is and you know why Groovy is by default selected, because it is recommended. That's why we are learning the Groovy over here. But in case if you want to work on any other language like Bean Shell or something, you just go here and select the Bean Shell from here, right? Then we have this parameters section. Parameter passed to script. What does it means? So basically we will use this to pass parameter to the script which we will write over here. Okay, and we can access these parameters via providing the arguments just like this one, aux, and then type this one. We will see this in our upcoming tutorials, but right now to understand this, we use these parameters, this particular field, to use the parameters we can access via the arguments, right? So this is the purpose of this particular field. Then we have this script file. So for example, you have written a very long script and you don't want to write it completely over here. So what you can do is that you can write in a file and then you can import or open this file here, right? Then it will be easier. So basically we will be specifying an external file instead of writing the code here. There's a difference, right? And this is when you have a very large script. This the scenario when you should use this external one. Okay, and then we have this cache compile script if available. By default is ticked. So what it means that it enables caching of the script. So whatever we write, it will cache that script, and when we use the caching mechanism, so basically it will pick up the things from the cache instead of executing on the runtime, which gives us a better performance. So my recommendation is that always check this one when you are working with the scripts. And then finally we have this script area where we can write our logic, we can write our Groovy script in our tutorial series, right? And when let's summarize the best practices for this JSR sampler. Always use Groovy. This is my recommendation. Always use cache, use JMeter variables, properties, and response data for the test interaction. Log messages during debugging to identify the issues. So in our first tutorial, I told you that how to log information, right? So logging of that information, and the purpose of logging the information is to debug the script. So I want to see what is happening with my script, right? So that was the purpose. And When we talk about, using this JSR sampler, so when should we use? The question interviewer might ask you that when you should use this one. So generating a dynamic data, we'll see those things, adding conditional logic before sending a request, extracting a response data for sessions, manipulating JMeter variables dynamically. So these are the main reasons, right, when you should use the JSR 2 to 3 sampler. So if I need to conclude today's tutorial, so JSR 2 to 3 sampler in JMeter is a powerful tool for adding script logic to the performance test. It follows the JSR 2 to 3 specification, allow multiple scripting languages, with Groovy being the recommended choice for the speed and efficiency. So this is the summary of this today's session, which is about JSR 2 to 3 sampler. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone and welcome to this Groovy JMeter Tutorial Series. In this tutorial, we will learn about the variables. So let's begin. Variables in programming are used to store and manage the data. Now think variable is just like a container which holds a value, and now that value can be changed during the program execution. Now, for example, you have 100 containers, and the question is that how you will identify that which container contains what value. So, in order to identify that, every container should have a unique name and the data type that defines the kind of a value it can store. So, basically, if you have 100 containers, you need to label them. For example, the first container contains the value A. The second container contains the value B, right? So in order to understand this concept more, so let me give you one more interesting example on this one. So for example, if I'm coming to your place and I have some fruits, okay? And then I will ask you to, okay, put those fruits in a container and I will grab those or pick up those tomorrow. Now, the container of a fruit is basically a variable, and then you will ask me to label that so that tomorrow I can easily identify that okay, this particular box contain the fruits which you need to pick up tomorrow from me, right? So this how your variables work in the programming language. Now the question here is that why we need variables, why we need containers, why we need to store a value, why we need to label those containers. So basically, when you are working with your scripts, you don't need to go with the hard-coded values. This means that every time, for example, you need a value 15 in your script 10 times. Now, first approach is that you will type 15 every time you are using this particular value. This is the one approach. The other approach is that you create a variable and store the value 15 in it and reuse that variable as many times as you want across your multiple test or scripts, right? So the first point is that we don't need to go with the hard-coded values. This is the first reason. The second reason is that we are working with applications which are dynamic in nature. Dynamic means that when you are interacting with this application, based on the request, you will be getting different response, which we in the lame terms, which we call it as a dynamic data, right? So we need to store that dynamic values, and those dynamic values can be your user credential, API keys, or response values. So that's why we need some container to store those values. Now, the third thing is that changing a variable value, update it across all occurrences, making maintenance easier. Now, let's take the first example where we discuss that in scripts, you have to use a value 15 for like 10 times. Tomorrow, the value has changed to 20. Okay. Now, what you need to do is that you need to go to every place and update the value. But in case of the variables, what you need to do is that you need to go to that particular variable and update the value, and it will update across all the occurrences in your test cases. So that's the reason why we need to use the variables. Now let's go to the JMeter and start writing about these variables. In JMeter, what we need to do is that we need to go to this test pane, right click on this one, go to add, go to threads, then add a thread group. Now inside this, again right click, add, go to sampler, then JSR223 sampler, click on this one. Now we need to work with the variables, right? We know these are the containers with which contains a value, and it also have a name or the label, right? So in Groovy, you can define the variables in different ways. The first way is that simply I will say use the keyword of def and name. For example, you need to create a variable with the name. Okay, so name of this particular variable is the name. Okay, now I have just created a variable, means that I have created a container and I labeled it as a name, and now I know that this particular container will contain a name. Okay, this is the first way. Still we haven't have a value in this container. The second way is that we can simply go with, say, a keyword variable which is var, and we say, for example, city, right? Now here we are, again we have created a variable. It's a container and the name of container is city, but it doesn't contain any value. And the third thing is that we can create a variable where we can explicitly define the data. So basically the concept here is that the value which we need to put into the container can be anything, right? For example, it can be fruits, it can be vegetables, it can be your cosmetic, it can be your mobile accessories. But all these are of different categories, right? So in the programming, the concept is same. Every data is categorized, right? So for example, if I want to write a message, so message is basically a value which has a data type of string. So in the programming, we categorize that kind of a data as a string. So for example, I'll say a string and I will say message. So here the word message is basically a name of variable, right? Now these are three ways we can define a variable. Okay, but still so far there's no value inside that particular variable. So how we can assign a value to these particular variables? So simply if I say name is equals to, I will say testing. Now this is a variable name and this is a value which are stored in this particular variable. In similar way, we say here like Sydney. Okay, so now this is a value stored in a variable which has been labeled as city. Similarly, we have this third variable, and here I say welcome to Groovy JMeter Tutorial, right? So this is a string because this is a complete sentence. Now this complete sentence is basically stored in a variable and this variable is labeled as a message. So tomorrow if I want to use this variable, so I will be calling this with this particular name. Okay, so that's how you can define the variables and declare or assign the values to the a variable. Right now we are just understanding the variable, but tomorrow what we will do is that we will create a variable, and on the runtime whatever the value we will get, we'll store that value in this particular container and then call the variable. So let me summarize this, right? So variables are just like a container, okay, which has a label and it contains or it stores a value. Okay, and they are used for different purposes, which we discussed earlier, right? So that we avoid the hard coded values we need to update at one place, it will automatically get updated across all the addresses, right? So this is the purpose of using the variables in any programming language. And in this series, as we are learning the Groovy for the JMeter, so we will be utilizing those variables very frequently in our scripts. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone and welcome to this Groovy JMeter Tutorial Series. In this particular tutorial, we will learn about the different data types in Groovy. So let's begin. In our previous tutorial, we learned that what are the variables, and we know that variables are used to store a value. Now these values can be of different data types. Now let's go to this testpan over here. Right click on this one, go to threads, add thread group. Now inside this one, go to add sampler, JSR223 sampler. Now, so there are different types of data in the Groovy. So one category is known as primitive data types. So in this particular category, the data types are integer, floating point, boolean, and character. So first one is integer. Integer means it can be a number, right? So you can define using byte, short, int, and long. So let me give you example over here. Simply type int, then x is the name of the variable, is equals to 10. And similarly, you say long y is equals to a large value, but at the end you need to use L. L means a long value over here. So let's simply go here and go to println, and here we'll print the values. So I will say x colon is basically using the dollar sign we can call this variable. Okay, and then we have y colon and the value of y. Okay, and now simply run this one, and let me run this one. Okay, so println, we know that it will print the value in the console. You see that the value of x and y has been printed over here. So this particular data type is belongs to a category where you need to store numbers. And when we talk about the floating point numbers, the floating point numbers are basically a decimal numbers, means 10.5. Okay, for example, if I remove this one from here and if I say float, okay, a is equals to 10.5, and at the end you need to provide f, means this is a floating or decimal value. And similarly, you go with the double, b is equals to, again it's a big decimal value, so 99, and here you don't need to provide the d or b at the end. Okay, similarly just println, and I will directly go with dollar $a and dollar $b. Okay, and now run this one and just go to the console over here. So you see that 10.5 and 20.99 is being printed over here. Okay, now the third thing is boolean. So boolean means that this particular variable can either store true or the false value. Okay, so for example, you need to define using the boolean, then I say is past is equals to true, or simply you can go with the false value. Okay, so println, and I will, using the dollar sign, I will say is past, and run this one, and you see that the true got printed. Now Here, what I'm doing is that I'm intentionally providing a true value. But in the real-time scenarios, what happens is that when we are working with the dynamic applications, so application might return true or false. So in that particular case, we will be using a boolean. Okay. Now the fourth one, which is again a primitive, which is known as character. Okay. So you need to type char, then name of this variable, and here I will provide a single character. Okay. So if this is the case for you, you need to simply in the single quotes you need to provide that particular character. Okay. Now run this one and you see that the L will be printed over here. Okay. So basically, sorry, you need to provide a dollar sign or to print the variable. By default, if you go without go with this one, it consider it as a string, and that's why L got printed. Actually, the A should be printed because this L variable contains the value A over here. Okay. Now you see that A got printed over here successfully. Okay. Now we have object data types. So basically, Groovy provides powerful object data types that simplify scripting. For example, string. So you can define a string with the single quotes or the double quotes, and even use the triple quotes. So if you want to go with a simple string, you can either go with a single quotes or double quote. But when you need a multi-line strings, then you need to define in the triple quotes. Okay. So here, what you need to do is that string, and the name of string here, I say hello. Hello is the name of this variable. And here either you can go with a single quotes like testing, and let's print this one, and I will print hello. Okay, so I'm just passing this variable over here in the print statement, and on this one you'll see that testing got printed. Now if I change it to double quote here, it will still print it. Okay, so let's run this one and go back here. You see that testing got printed again over here, right? But if you want to go with the multi-line, then you need to provide this into a triple quote. Okay, so triple quote from start, and then triple quote at the end. And here I am saying, for example, let me put it down so that you can see that this is a multi-line. So here I'll say testing Groovy language. Okay, so now this is a multi-line. Now if I run this one, what happens is that this multi-line will be get printed over here, testing Groovy language, right? So in order to work with the multi-line string, you need to go with the triple quote. Now when we talk about the object data types, we have a list or array list. So array list is basically allows to add a multiple data types. Okay, so lists in Groovy are dynamic and allow multiple data types. Okay, so what I do is that let me remove this one, and I'll say def, and let me take an example of fruits, and here I will say my first fruit is apple, then I will say we have banana, then with the comma the third one is, for example, orange. Now this is the array list. Okay, and now in order to access these, because these are now more than one value, and accessing the value is based on the indexing. So the first value is on the 0, the second value is index 1, and the third value is index 2, 0, 1 and 2. So for example, if I want to access the first value, what I'll do is that simply here I will say, okay, println and fruits, and fruits you need to print the first. Okay, so if I run this one, you see that apple got printed over here. Now if I change it to 2, this time orange will get printed over here, right? You see that? And when you're working with the data types. Now this is a array list, and if you want to add a value to this list, then how you can do it? Okay, so simply what you can do is that you say fruits, the name of this array list, then add, and whatever you want to add here. So I will say let's add mango. Okay, and now if I go here and print fruits, and now if I don't provide the specific index, it will print the complete array list. Okay, so if I run this one and go here, so you see that previously it printed apple, orange, and then a complete list with the mango which we got added. Okay, now another object based data is known as map or hash map. So maps are basically store key value pairs and are similar to the JSON objects. So for example, I will say, let me remove this one from here and let me add some data for the person. Okay, and inside this bracket I say name colon, the name of person is testing, and for example the age of that person is 30. Okay, now here you see that we have a key pair combination, means that you have a key, this is the key and the value, this is the key and this is the value. Okay, now in order to access the name from this particular one, what I need to do is that in the print and statement I will say person dot name. Okay, and let me remove this one from here and run this one. So you see that the testing got printed over here. And similarly, if I want to add something here, for example, I want to add a city, and city is Sydney, to this particular hash map. This again really simple. I will say person dot I want to add city, and city here is Sydney. Okay, and now if I go with this print statement, again this print statement will print the complete hash map. Okay, and if I run this one, go back here, so you see that name testing is 30 and city Sydney. So that's how you can work with the hash map or this kind of a data. Now the third category is basically known as dynamic typing in Groovy. Now what does it means? So dynamic means that when we are using a def keyword, it will automatically detect the data type. Okay, so let me go remove this one from here and here, and what I will do is that using this def keyword, so I say a is equals to 100. Now I want to see that either Groovy is automatically picking up that this is an integer value or not. Okay, so how I can identify this? Simply in the println, I'll go with this one. I say type of a, and then dollar sign, and then in the curly brackets we need to type a dot get class with the capital C and small brackets. Okay, and now we are good to go, and just run this one and go here. You see that the type of a is basically an integer, and this proves that the Groovy is dynamic type language. Okay, and then finally the fourth category is that the strong versus weak typing, and let me give you example for this one. So let me go with this one, like a string, and a string a is equals to, let's provide a string over here. So if I provide with double quotes here and say hello, so this hello is basically a strong type because we are explicitly defining that this will be a string. This is a string, right? On the other hand, if I go with like def, okay, and def b is equals to hello. So this is a weak typing. This is strong because we are explicitly, and here it is using the def keyword. So this is a weak typing. Now let me summarize this particular tutorial, what we have learned over here. So basically we learned about different data types. There are four mainly different categories. First one is the primitive data types, where we learned about integer, floating point numbers, boolean, character. Then the second category is that object data types, where we learned about string, list or the array list, map or the hash map. Then the third category is dynamic typing, okay, and the fourth was last, which was strong versus weak typing. So now when you're working with the Groovy, you need to understand that when you're creating a variable, what should be the type of that particular variable. So as a tester, what we are doing a mistake is that we are hitting an API, for example, and API giving me some floating value. For example, it's giving me some decimal value, and we try to store that value in a float. But the value is quite big. For example, the value is like 29 dot like this. Now, if you use a float, then float might not work in this case. You need to go with the double because double stores a larger decimal value. Okay, so when you're working, you need to understand that you should be using the correct data type to store a value in a variable. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone and welcome to this Groovy JMeter Tutorial Series. In this particular tutorial, we will learn about the operators in Groovy. So let's begin. Just like any other programming language, we have operators in Groovy as well. Now, what are the operators? Operators are basically used to perform some operations. Now, these operations can be any calculations, any logical operation. So when we talk about the mathematical calculations like addition, subtraction, so these all are basically operations, and these operations are being done through the operators. So you need to go to this official website of the Groovy, click on this documentation, and here you will see the operators over here. Just click on this one. So we have different categories of the operators in the Groovy. So we have arithmetic operators. Arithmetic means that if we need to do some kind of mathematics like addition, subtraction, division, remainder, power, so all the symbols are provided over here. You can use those when you're performing some arithmetic operations. Then we have unary operators like this one. Then we have assignment arithmetic operator. The binary arithmetic operators, as we see above, also available in an assignment form, which means that we will be assigning and doing a arithmetic operation as well. We will see this practically shortly, but right now we have then relational operators, then we have logical operators, then we have bitwise operators. If we go down, conditional operators, so there are so many, but what we will do is that we pick up the common ones and do some practical. But you need to go to the official website and just go through all these operators and understand that when you should use these operators when you are working with the Groovy JMeter scenarios. Now open the JMeter and see this practically. Simply go to the JMeter over here, and inside this taskbar, let's right click on this one, go to add, go to threads, then thread group, and then inside this thread group we need to add a sampler. So right click on this one, add sampler, then JSR223 sampler, click on this one. Now start with the very basic arithmetic operations which are used for the calculations. Okay, so what I'll do is that I'll create a variable a is equals to 15, then def b is equals to 4. Okay, now let's perform some addition on this one, and we'll say println. Either we can go with the println and say a plus b, right? And simply run this one, and just run this one. So inside the console, you will see that we have got the answer because it done the additional thing. Like 15 plus 4 is basically 19. In a similar way, you can go with a minus b and run this one, and you will see that we have 11 over here. Now you can do more calculations, for example, like division here as well. I will say, for example, a, then I'll say multiply b, right? And here, let me, instead of 15, let's go with 5. So 5 into 4 is basically 20. So you will get the 20 answer over here in the console. So you can perform anything like multiplication, simple division. So for division, you need to use this / and run this one. And here again, you will see that the answer is 1.25. And just like you need to go to their official website over here to understand what are the symbols you need to use in order to perform those operations. For example, here you see that for addition you need to use this, for division you need to use this, then for multiplication you need to use this, and for the power you need to use steric twice. So if I go here and let's try this one, double steric. So 5 power 4, right? So run this one, and here you will get the result in the console, which is 625, right? So that's how you can perform the calculation in the Groovy, and this is how you can perform the calculations within the JMeter using the JSR22 plugin. And these are basically, we will learn about the different scenarios where you need to perform some calculation in order to work with the performance scenarios later on. But right now, just understand that how we can use the arithmetic operators within the JMeter. Okay. And then we have an assignment operator. So assignment operator means that we are assigning a value, and at the same time we are basically doing the arithmetic operation. Okay. So what I'll do is that we know that a is equals to 5. Okay. Now what I'll do is that we will be doing assignment operator, right? So I will say a plus equals to like 10. So what it will do is that it will add as well as assign the value. Okay, so if I go here and print a, so it will print the value. Let's print ln a and run this one. So it's not printing anything. So basically there's a space over here plus equals to, and now let's run this one, and this time you will see that we got the 15 answer. Basically it added 5 to the 10. You can similarly do with the like multiplication, like 5 multiplied by 10, right? And if I run this one, you will see that we have a value 50, right? You can also do the simple assignment. So here in the first step, we have assigned a value to a variable a. So this is a simple assignment. Here, what we did is that we have done assignment with the operator, which are the arithmetic one, like assigning, and at the same time, we are performing an operation as well, right? So this is what we have done. Then we have relation, like if we want to compare something, we can go with the relational comparison operators. So for example, if I say like this is 15 and this is, for example, I will say if b is equals to 10. Now we can compare this one like a is equals to b. So obviously a is not equals to b in this case. So it will return false, right? So if I go here, it will say false. But if I say 15 is equals to 15, so this will now return a true, right? Let me show you again. It will return a true over here. So in order to compare the different values when you are working with the different response times, different values, so these operators are really useful because you need to compare what you want. For example, you're saying that your expected response time should be less than 1 second, 2 second, or whatever your criteria is. So you can write the script here and compare the value here as well. Okay, so just like this one, if I go here, you go with the not equals to. So not equals to is basically this exclamation mark, then equal sign and equal to b. Now a is not equal to b, which is true, so it should return a true value over here. Then we have logical operators. So logical operators are basically used to evaluate the multiple conditions when you have more than one condition. Right now, here we are comparing a is either equal to b or a is not equal to b, right? This is one condition. But what if I say a is equal to b and b is equal to c? Then print d, right? So here we have a multiple condition. So whenever you're dealing on the multiple condition, you need to go with the logical operators, and the logical operators are and or. Okay, so simply if I say a is equals to b, and here I say left c is equals to 10. Okay, and I will say print ln a is equals to b and a is equals to c. So we are saying that a is equals to b and a is equals to c. Now here we are using AND. So AND means that if this statement is true and this statement is true, then it will only return a true value. So both needs to be true. In other combination, it will be false. For AND, both needs to be true in order to get a true value. So here it will give a false value because there are two conditions, and if we go here, you see that we got false. So if I change this to 10, now a is equals to b and now a is also equals to c. So both statement, the first one and the second one is true. When both are true, then it will return true over here. So if I run this one, so this time you will see that we will get the true. And in case of OR, so if this is true, then we will get true. If this is true, we will get true. If both are true, we will get true, right? We will only get false in a case where both are false. So here, how we will use OR in this way, right? So if I say 15 over here, so A is equals to B, which is false, or I'm saying that either A is equals to B or A is equals to C. But in this case, A is not equals to B. So this statement will give false. But this second statement, A is equals to C, is true. So in this case, the whole statement will return true over here. So if I run this one, you will see that we will get true because it's OR, right? So if I change here a value 15, now A is equals to B, false, then A is equals to C. Again, now both statements will be false. In this case only, it will return false. So if I run this one, and if you open this one, you'll see that we get false over here. So that's how you can, use the logical operators. So if I give you an example in terms of a JMeter, you need to check that if the user is active. So your condition is that user should be active, but it should not be expired. Or user is active and the date of birth or the card should be expired. Anything, it can be any scenario. So I'm just giving you hypothetical examples over here just to make you understand that these logical operators will be really helpful when you are working in the scripts. Okay. Then membership operators will check that either it will contain the value or not, because it will check the whole list, and from the list it will say either this particular element exists in this list or not. So we know about the list, so what I'll do is that I'll simply create a list over here, and A is equals to, I'll say 10, 15, 25. And now what I will say is that does this contains 15 or not? Okay, does it contains 15 or not? I'll say 10 in A. Does A contains 10? Yes, it contains 10, right? So that's why we got true. And if I say 20 in A, obviously A doesn't have 20, so it should return false. So you see that we got false. So now, for example, you're working with the API and you want to verify some response, and you got similar kind of a response, and you need to ensure that this response should have a 20 value or not. You can assert the value, right? So there we will learn about different scenarios. Don't worry about that, but just try to understand that why we should use the membership operators, right? And finally, we have ternary operators, and these ternary operators are basically a shorter way to write the conditions. Okay, so what it means is that if I say age is equals to 18, now I'll say if category is equals to age is less than and equals to 18 or 19, and then using a question mark, I will say if age is greater than or equal to 18, so what it should be called as adult. Else it should be, it's just like we are writing if else statement, right, in a simple way. So I'll say minor, right? If the age is 18 or greater, then it would be adult, else minor. And simply I will say print category and run this one, and if you go here, you will see that we got adult. But if I go here and print 17 and run this one, so you will see that we got the minor. We will see these things in detail in upcoming, so that when we actually work on the different scenarios. But right now, just understand how these operators work here, right? So basically, we have covered basic operators which we usually use in the JMeter. So like arithmetic operators, assignment operators, relationship operators, logical operators, membership operators, ternary operators. So these are the very common which we usually use in handling the complex scenario in the JMeter. However, this is not a limit. You might have now made a different scenario. So what you need to do is that you need to go to this Groovy website and you need to look into the different other operators here. For example, the bitwise operator, you need to compare on the bit level like this one. So you can do this. And for example, if you need, so this is a very good operator called Elvis operator. So Elvis operator is basically a shortening of ternary operator, and the purpose is that one instance of where this is handy is returning a sensible default value if an expression resolves to the false, right? So this is a case over here. So then we have a safe navigation operator. The safe navigation operator is used to avoid a null pointer exception. Typically, when you have a reference to an object, you might need to verify that it is not null before accessing the methods or the properties of the object. So you might have come across where you have to check that the variable or the object doesn't have a null value. So you can go with this safe navigation operator. So just go through this documentation. That would be really helpful when you are working with the operators in the Groovy, and especially when you are working in the JMeter while you're handling the different scenarios. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone and welcome to this Groovy JMeter Tutorial Series. In this tutorial, we will learn about if-else statement, but what we will do is that we will be using a API and then we'll build our concept around some scenario. So let's begin. So basically first we will understand what is if-else. So for example, if I ask you, just go to library and grab a book of JMeter. Okay. Now, this is a one statement here. For example, you go there and you didn't find the JMeter book. Then what you will do? So here, if I say, just go to library, grab a book of JMeter. If book is not available, grab me a book of Groovy. Now, you see that? Here we are using if. Okay. And for example, even if there's a no book available for the Groovy, then what? Now, I'm changing my statement over here. Just go to the library, grab a book of JMeter. If the JMeter book is not available, grab a book of Groovy, else grab a book of Python programming. Now, if, else are both covered. So, in the programming, if, else work in the same way. I say if this is true, okay. If not, then this one. Okay. So for this particular tutorial, I will be using this API from here. So this is basically JSON placeholder.typecode.com. Here you just scroll down here and here you see that we have a get call for the post one. So if I click on this one, so what it will do is that it will give me all the content about this particular user one, ID one, and the title of the post and the body of the post here. Okay, so let's go to the JMeter over here, and inside this task plan, just go add thread group. Now inside this thread group, go to the HTTP request, because this is a HTTP request, and this is basically if I go back here, so it's a HTTPS. So let me copy this one and go back to the JMeter, and then we need to provide a IP or a server name. So if I go back here, so this is basically a server name over here. So copy this one and go back here, provide this one, and then we need to set a method. So this is a get, so already the get is set over here, and we need to provide a path. So path is always after the forward slash. So if I go back here, so this is the path. So copy this one, go back again and provide this one. Now let's name it as JSON API. Okay, and now what I'll do is that let's go to thread group again, add a simple listener, and let's run this one and see what happens over here. So API got executed successfully, and this is the request, and this is the response we are getting in this particular API. Okay, now what I will do is that I will add one more sampler over here, which is JSR223 sampler, and this sampler will be after this API request over here. The first thing is that I will create a variable and I will extract a code from this request. This is a previous request, and convert it into an integer, because whenever we hit a API, so we get this response code which is 200, and this is an integer value. Okay, so here what we need to do is that I will say int status code is equals to, so previous dot get response code, and then I need to convert this into a integer. So dot to integer, okay, and let's just print this one and just to show, and let's see if either we are really getting this stress code or not. Okay, so now let's run this one, and if I go back here, so you see that we got the status code 200, and this 200 is basically coming from this API. This API is giving us this one, right? Now what I will do is that I will be fetching the complete body. Okay, so for that I will say string response body is equals to, and then I'm again using previous request, previous dot get response data as a string. Okay, and again let's print this one and see either we are getting this information or not. So let's print this one and run this one again, and if I go here, so you see that we got the status code, we got the whole response here in terms of the string. Okay, now let's come to the actual part. Now scenario is that we will be writing a if else statement, and we will be writing like if the status code, because here we are getting the status code and here we are getting the response body. Okay, so what I will say, if the status code is 200, this is my condition which I need to test. I will say if the status code is 200, then we will log it. Okay, else we will say that there is a error in the API because we haven't got the response. Okay, so simply what I'll do is that here, if now we are verifying the status code. Okay, if status code is equals to 200, then in the curly braces I will say log dot info, and here I will say, for example, API response is okay, and then I will go with printing the status code over here. Okay, and because this statement is here, then we need to go with this way. So status, so I'll copy this one so that we should not mess up with the things. Status code. Okay, so this is a if statement. If this is 200, then it should go with this particular statement, and this statement is basically logging that API response okay, and it will print the actual response we are getting from the API request. Okay, so if I run this one, if I go back here, so here you see that nothing is happening because we are now logging into the system. Okay, this is a log, right? So if you remember, we need to go to the log viewer, and here we need to see if this, so you see that we got some error, right? Because it says that it's not startup failed, and we got some exception. So whenever we are trying to log something and if we got some error, we need to understand what is happening. So this is the exception we are getting over here, right? So this is, if you go scroll down, so this is the code or something, this is a problem. So let's go back, and what I'll do here and see what is happening. So let me close this one, and the problem here is that we haven't closed this statement. Okay, so what we need to do is that instead of the quotes at the end, we need to go with a small bracket. Okay, now let's run this one, and now if I go here, go to the log viewer, now this time see what happens, and again we are getting this error over here. It says like this one. Okay, and if I clean this one and run this one again, so this time there's no error here, and here you will see that the sampler, this one actually, it says that API response is okay and we are getting 200. So this means that our code is absolutely working fine. Now let me close this one again, and here if this not happens, then what? Okay, for example, we know that I'm just trying to intentionally fail this one here, and now I will say else. Okay, I will say else. If this is not the case, then what you should do? Okay, so I will say simply I'm again logging the information, log dot. So let me paste it over here, and here we say API failed. Okay, and we'll print the status code as well. Now let's clean this one and run this one again. And now if I go here, go to the log viewer and see what happens over here. So you see that the API failed block got executed. This means that else got executed. You see that this else got executed, and it says that API failed and we got the status 200. So when you're working with the JMeter, so in order to get at this kind of scenarios where you need to check, okay, if this is true, then give me this. If this is false, just give me this. Okay. So these are scenarios you can handle using the if else. Here I'm just giving you a very basic scenario. You're checking that the status code which you're getting through the API, you're just verifying that if the status code is 200, then API is okay. If status code is not 200, then API is not okay. This means that API is not working, for example. And now you will see that it will execute the if blocks here. So if block says API response is okay and 200. So that's how you can work with the if else statement when you are working with the Groovy in the JMeter. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone and welcome to this Groovy JMeter Tutorial Series. In this particular tutorial, we will learn about the for loop with example and the real-time scenario. So let's begin. So what are the loops? Loops are basically a fundamental concept in programming which allows us to execute a block of code multiple times. Now let me give you a real-life example. If I ask you that you should go to the cricket ground and take a complete one round. Now this is a one round, but if I say just go and take 10 rounds of that particular stadium, so you are doing the same thing again and again. So that's how the loops actually works in the programming. So you are doing a repetitive work, right? So if you want to run a block of code multiple times, then we will be using the loops. So in JMeter, loops are particularly useful when we need to process multiple data elements dynamically, such as if we need to iterate over a list of values in the API response. The for loop in Groovy helps in executing a piece of code for a defined number of times. This is especially helpful in API testing scenarios where we need to iterate over a JSON response and extract values dynamically for validation or further API calls. Now, first, I will give you an overview of the syntax of the for loop, and then we will see or we can iterate over the JSON response in the JMeter. Okay. Now let's go to the notepad over here and let me show you the syntax for loop. So start with the for, then we have a variable which will use for the collection. Okay, variable for the collection, and then after that we have this block of code over here which we need to execute. So here we will be having that particular code, right? So if I go, so here basically a code to execute. This is the one syntax. And other syntax is that which is very common. So basically, so for, then you must have seen like int I is equals to 0, and when I is less than the, for example, 10, then I plus plus, and then based on this one you would be executing your block of code. And again, inside your for loop we have the code over here. So first one is really simple. Let me explain you the second one over here. So basically we are taking a variable and the initial value of the variable is 0. Now here we have a condition. So condition is I is less than 10. So basically based on this condition, how many iteration we need to do. Just like I give you example that you need to take a 10 rounds of a cricket stadium, right? In the similar way, I am defining over here that this loop needs to execute when I is less than 10. And for every iteration, we are doing a increment so that we can go to the other iteration of the loop. Okay. Now let's go to the JMeter again, and simply what I will do is that go to the test plan, go to add, go to thread group, then go to add, go to sampler, then JSR223 sampler over here, and here we'll be start writing a loop. But before that, what we need to do is that we need to open the API which we need to use. So we use this application for the last demo, so we will be using same for this tutorial. So let me scroll down, and here you see that we have this slash users. So basically this API is returning all the users, right? There's so much data, right? So let me copy this data and let me go here. Now right click on this thread group, go to add, go to sampler, go to HTTP request, here paste this one, and after the slash just copy this part from here and paste it here in the path, remove this from here, and this HTTPS needs to be here in the protocol, and remove the HTTP from over here. Now we need to move this up because we need to send a request first, and then we will actually traverse from the users in the response. Okay, so here it will be users, and now simply what I do is that first add a listener and see if it's working fine or not. So the users is working fine and we are getting a response. Now click on this JSR22 sampler and start writing our script. So what we need to do is that first we will create a variable, and in that particular variable we will be storing the complete API response. Okay, so let me create a variable over here and I will name it as response, and I will get response from the previous sampler request. So preview dot get, then response data as a string. So it will give me the response from the previous request, the API response, right? And so what I'll do is that let's do println and print response and execute this one and see what happens. So here you see that the whole response has been printed over here, right? Now what I'll do is that it's working. The second is that I need users. So for that I need to this parse this JSON. Okay, so in order to parse the JSON, what I need to do is that I need to use the JSON slurper class, which will provide a method which will actually help us to parse the text. And the benefit of using the method is that it will automatically parse it. We don't need to write a code for this one. Okay, so in order to use that, what we need to do is that we need to import that first. So import and import groovy dot json dot json and it's SLUR per. Okay, SLURPER. Okay. Now, once we have imported this one, what we need to do is that we will be creating one more variable called users and say new, then say groovy dot JSON, and we'll be using this one. So let me copy from here, and from this class we'll be using a method called parse text, and which needs to be parsed. The data is coming in this particular variable called response. Okay. And once we have done this one, what we need to do is that now we will loop through the users. We have a multiple users coming in the response. If I go back to the response, so you see that we have user ID 4, 5. Okay. And I need a name from every data. So this means that I need to traverse, or I need to loop through every data. Okay. So here for, I will say, a variable which is required, and this is a collection where we have a data, and here simply I need to whatever I need to do. So for example, I need to log this info. I might need to extract a value, and then I can use that value in my upcoming API calls. I might need to generate some data based on the response. So all these kind of scenarios can be handled using this approach. Okay. So info will be basically user dot name, and whenever this loop execute, so we get the value in the user, and from the user what we are saying that we get a name. Okay. And if I remove this one, so now we are logging this one. So what I will do is that simply clean this up and run this one, and our script got executed, and now this time you see that our sampler is also in a green state. So if I go here and go to log viewer and scroll up, so you see that we are actually getting the names, right, from the response. So these are the names, right, all these names. In similar way, you can traverse the other data, get any specific data, and perform any operation as per your scenario or the requirement. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share, and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much, and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone, and welcome to this Groovy JMeter Tutorial Series. In this particular tutorial, we will learn the difference between for, while, and do while loops. So let's begin. In our previous tutorial, we learned about the for loop, and we know that the loops are used for the iterations. When we talk about Groovy JMeter, so you will have to work with either for loop, while loop, or do while loop. So you need to understand the difference between these three so that you can utilize the loop as per your requirement and the scenario. So the first thing is that when you should use the for loop. So for loop you should use when the number of iterations are known. For example, if you want to run for the 10 iterations, 5 iterations, you will be using the while loop when you don't know the number of iterations. Okay. And do while, it ensures that at least one iteration will be executed. Okay. And now for loop is best for iterating over the list, ranges, and the sequences. And when we talk about the while loop, so it will run until a condition is met. So while loop is based on conditions. That's why we don't know the number of iterations. Okay. And when we talk about the do while, so executing at least once before checking the condition. So it will execute once, then after that it will keep checking the conditions. Okay. And then when we talk about the conditions itself, so predefined range or sequence in the case of for loop, in case of while loops until a condition is false. Okay. And in case of do while, condition checked after execution. Okay, and when these loops will be terminated. So in case of for loop stops after iterating through the sequence, whereas while stops when the condition becomes false. And finally, do while terminated when a condition becomes false after at least one execution. That's why you need to use the do while, where you need to ensure that at least one iteration should be executed. Okay, now let's go to the JMeter and see those practically. Now in JMeter, what we need to do is that just go to the test plan, right click, go to add, go to threads, go to thread group, and inside this thread group we need to add the sampler. Go to add sampler, JSR223 sampler, and here we'll be writing our script. So first let's learn about the for loop. And we know that for loop is used when we know the number of iterations. Okay, so the syntax is for, I say int I is equals to 1, then condition I is less than equals to 5, and then I plus plus, and then the body of the loop. So inside this I will simply say print ln and I. Now let's run this one and see what happens over here. So when I execute this one, if I go to the console, so you see that 1 to 5 got printed. And why I'm using for loop? Because I know that how many times I need to execute. Okay, 5 times. Okay, now let's talk about the while loop. And we know that when the number of iterations are unknown and it depends on a condition, in that particular case, we should use the while loop. Okay, now let me give you a real-time scenario. You need to hit the API until and unless the API returns 200 status code. Okay, so 200 status code means that there is a success. So I will try executing the API until it returns a 200. So in this case, I don't know how many iterations I need to execute. Maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe 15, right? So in that kind of scenario, you should use the while loop. Okay, so let's suppose I say int count equals to 1, and the syntax is that while. Okay, so first is the condition, right? While count is less than equals to 5, then we need to print something. Okay, and the interesting thing is that, for example, I say print ln, and here we print the count, and after printing the count I am actually incrementing. So the difference, you see that here first we are checking the condition, then incrementing. So that's why it will keep checking unless the condition will not meet, right? So if I run this one and go back, so you see that it got printed 1 to 5. But here it depends on the condition, this condition. Okay, and finally, when we talk about the do while, so the use case is that when the loop must execute at least once regardless of the condition. So either condition is true or false. In either case, it should execute only one iteration. Okay, so I will remove this part from here, and let's say none. Now in case of do while, we need to define the do thing first. So do, here's the body, and here what we need to do is that we are printing, so print ln and print ln num, and then we need to increment the num. And once, because till so far we haven't checked any condition, so what happens here is that that's why it will execute once for sure. Okay, now after that I will say while while now we have a condition num is less than or equals to, for example, we say 3. Okay, now let's run this one and see what happens. If I go here, so it will executing print ln to this one, then print ln num plus plus num is 1, print ln 1, while num is less than equals to 3. So you see that we got 1, 2 or 3 printed. So in case if I run this one, okay, then see what happens, because we are saying that it will always execute once, right? So if I run this one and go back to the console, so you see that 10 got printed here. Why 10 got printed? The reason is that first this part of the code will execute. So it will go here, it will print 10 and then incrementing a value. Then here it's checking num is less than equals to 3. So here num is 10. Num is 10 is not less than equal to 3. False. But still, because this part of the code got executed, that's why 10 got printed successfully in the console. So this is basically how you can work with the for, while and do while. So let me summarize when you should use these loops. So you should use the for loop when you are working with the list, arrays or a fixed number of iterations, when you know that how many times you need to execute. When we talk about the while, use while loop when looping based on the conditions such as waiting for response, retrying, failed requests, right? Then finally, you should use a do while loop when you need at least one iteration before evaluating a condition. Okay, you see that before even evaluating a condition, we are executing one iteration. Okay, and what happens is that if I remove this part, it will be an infinite loop. It will crash the JMeter because the condition will never becomes false. So when you're working here, you need to ensure that you're incrementing a value. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone and welcome to this Groovy JMeter Tutorial Series. In this particular tutorial, we will learn about the functions. So let's begin. Functions are the reusable blocks of code designed to perform a specific task. Now what it means? It means that tomorrow if you're writing a script and you need to do calculations for the 10 times. And let's take example over here that you need to perform addition 10 times in your script. Now, the first approach is that you would be writing a additional logic every time when you need to perform addition. But the problem here is that tomorrow if there is any change in the logic, right? So you need to update every place where you have written that particular logic. So the approach which is best for this scenario is that to use the functions, because the functions are the reusable block of code. So you will be writing it once and then we will be calling as many times as we want in our script. So tomorrow if there is any kind of a change in the logic, so we need to change it only at one place. Now there are two kind of functions in the programming. So one is the built-in functions and other ones are the custom functions. So built-in, which are already provided by the programming language or scripting language, and the custom one which we write ourselves. So let's start with this one and right click on the test plan, go to add, go to threads, go to thread group, and inside the thread group again right click, add sampler JSR223 sampler, and here. So since our first tutorial, what we were doing is that we were logging the information using log.info, and whatever we were providing inside this one, it got logged. But how this logging is actually working? Here, this log.info is basically a function. The logic behind logging this is basically written already. We are just calling this built-in function over here. So for example, if I say hello and run this one, so it will log the information, right? So if I go here, log viewer, so this information should be logged over here, right? So this is basically a built-in function. Similarly, the print ln is a built-in function. We are just using that function, and whatever we want to print in the console, we just providing that string. We are not writing a logic to print that in the console. Okay, so let's go with some more functions over here which are really useful, which are built in. So for example, you need to generate a test data which is dynamic in nature. So for that, you might need to generate a random number. Okay, so for that, I will create a variable random number is equals to, now this math dot random is basically is a random function coming from the math class. Okay, and now I will say that okay, the random number should be between 100. Okay, so it will, whatever the random value being generated, it will multiply by 100 and as a integer. Okay, now we can simply say print ln, and here we say random. Let me copy this one and paste it here. Now you see that we are not writing the logic to generate the random number over here. We are just calling the built-in function. Okay, so if I run this one and if I go to the console over here, so this, you see that 99 got printed over here. Now if I run this again, so it will generate another random number 95, right? So if I run this again, you will see that another random number will be generated. So in order to generate a random number, so for example, tomorrow you need a word JMeter, and at the end of the JMeter there should be a unique number. For example, JMeter 1, JMeter 10, JMeter 5. Collectively it will make a unique data, right? So you can generate a random number and append that number with your string. It will make your data dynamic. Okay, now let's take another example over here. In some cases, what you need to do is that you need to get the current date and time. So for example, you need a timestamps for the request. Okay, now the purpose of the timestamp is that you might need to debug, you might need for the assertions, you want to see that which transitions are getting failed at what point of your performance execution, right? So how you can do this, simply I will say this and I will create a variable current and I say current date is equals to new date, and then I need to provide the format in which I need a date. Okay, so the common format is that is year, like 2025. Okay, then month, like 0203, like then I need a day, and then I need hours, then I need minutes, then I need seconds. Okay, and if I go here and print this one, so see what happens over here. So you see that the current date and time got printed. So when we are executing our performance test scripts, so it takes some time, right? So it might be executing the request which got failed, and you want the timestamp exactly. So it will have a timestamp of that particular request which got failed. And right now we got this particular date and time. Now if I run this again, obviously the time has been changed, right, since then. Now another request and see what happens. So you see that we got the exact current time, right? So whenever you're working in the performance test skills, you need to log the timestamp. So this is how you can log. And again, this is our the built-in functions. And when we talk about the built-in functions, we have the functions for the strings as well. Okay, so let me remove this part from the code. And for example, I say JMeter test. Okay, and what I need to do is that let me save it as name. Now, when you're running with your scripts, you need to work with the strings. For example, what you need to do is that you need a string in the uppercase. Okay, or you might need a substring from this one. Okay, so you can do these things in the JMeter. For example, here what you need to do is that you need to do name dot to, then we have a function called upper case, this one, right? So if I run this one, so see what happens over here. So you see that the complete JMeter test got printed in the capital, right? However, we have caps and smalls here as well. Similarly, what you can do is that you can convert in, you find a specific string for the verification purposes. So you can say sub string, you need a substring, and substring should start from like from 0 and from like 3. Okay, so if I run this one, you will see that it will print JME. So basically the strings start from 0 index, so 0 1 2, so basically 0 1 2 3. So that's why these three got printed. So when you're working with the API test and you're receiving a particular response in the very long string, and you just need a specific substring to verify that the API is working right or not. So you can get the substring from that and verify your requirement. Okay. Now we have already covered the timestamps, right? We have, now let me show you one more example in terms of the built-in function. You need a random string. Okay, so what you can do is that, let me remove this part of code and say random. Again, this is my variable in which I'm storing a random value. So I will say UUID dot random UUID and 2 dot 2, and then I'm converting it into a string. Now let's print this one into the console and run this one. And we go here in the console. So I got a unique UUID. And again, this is a unique identifier. UUID is a unique identifier. So the purpose of using the unique identifier is that you might need to identify your API request uniquely, so that tomorrow if you're debugging, so you can understand, okay, which API is actually failing at what particular point of the time. So you can use the UUID, you can use the timestamp, that will give you a lot of information when you are debugging or you are performing some assertions on your scripts. Now, besides using the built-in functions, what you can do is that you can write your own functions. Okay, so now let me show you how to write your own function. So how to work with writing the function, simply use the keyword called def. Then we need to perform, like, we need to provide a name of the function. So greet user is the name of my function, and what kind of a data this function will be using. So I will say this, it will use a string, and I need to provide a variable. So tomorrow whatever I provide to this function is basically a string, and this value will be stored using the name variable over here. Okay, and here I will say this function, what this will return. So I will say hello, and then I will say plus name. This will be returned by this particular function. Now we have created the function. Now what we need to do is that we need to call this function. So I will say def greet and greeting message is equals to greet greet user, and here we are actually calling this function. So greet tester. So we are passing a string value here, and now we say here, so let me scroll this down, say print ln, and print ln, let's go with this message. That's it. So run this one, and if I go here, you will see that hello tester got printed. Now, whenever I want to use this one, how many times even I want to use this one, I can simply use this one. So I can copy this one because I have written the function. So I will say greeting message 1, and here I will say tester 1. Okay, and let me close this log viewer and printing this one here. So you see that this is how it is easy to work with the function. We have written the function. The function is returning hello plus the name which we will provide over here into the function, and it will return the value. So run this one, and here is, you see that hello tester 1 both got printed over here. So that's how you can actually work with the built-in functions, and you can work by creating your custom functions when you are dealing with the different scenarios in the JMeter. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone and welcome to this Groovy JMeter Tutorial Series. In this particular tutorial, we will learn about the classes and objects. So let's begin. So when we are learning any programming language, we might have heard about the classes and objects. Now what is class? A class is basically a blueprint for creating objects containing properties which are variables and methods which are functions. Now in Groovy, classes are similar to the Java classes, but they are simpler and more flexible. Now, object is basically an instance of a class containing the actual values for the properties defined in the class. Now, let's learn about classes and objects in detail with the real-time example. So, for example, tomorrow you want to build your house, and obviously you have some parameters in your mind, you have some attributes in your mind. Okay, so you will go to the architect, and architect will design an architecture of your house. So how many rooms, the size of the rooms, how many windows you need, where you need a gate. Okay, so all this information will be converted into a architectural design. Now that design is basically a blueprint because it's not an actual house, but based on that architectural design, you can develop a house, the actual house. Now, the benefit here is that once you have an architecture design, so you can create as many houses as you can because you know how many rooms are required, what are the attributes of that house. Okay, in the same way, when a motor company launches a new car, so they create a design or a blueprint for that car. So how that car will look like, what features it will have, how the rims will look like. So once that design has been finalized, so based on that design, they will actually create the car. Now the car is basically an object, and that design is basically a class. So we are getting how these classes and objects work. So again, class is basically a blueprint through which we can create the actual objects. Now, what we need to do is that let's go to the JMeter and let's start creating the class and the objects. Now in JMeter, just go to this test plan, right click on this one, go to add, go to threads, go to thread group. And here inside this thread group, again, right click, add sampler, then JSR223 sampler. Okay, now in order to define a class, so basically we need to use a keyword called class. Okay, so the keyword is basically a class followed by the name of the class. So for example, I'm creating a class and the name of class is person, because tomorrow using this class I will be creating a actual persons. Okay, so I will naming it as person, and inside these brackets basically we will be defining the class. So what this class will contains, like we know that defining the properties, defining the methods. Okay, so let's define the property here. So I will say string string name, because we need a name of the person tomorrow. We need the, for example, the age. So age is basically an integer value, so we need a name and age of that person. So now these are basically our variables and these are the properties. Now we also know that we can have the methods or the functions. So let's define a function with a def keyword, and I'll say show details, and this function will basically print the name and the age. Okay, so what I'll do is that I'll say print ln, and it will print name. Okay, and let me write it properly. So it will print the name, and the name is basically coming through this particular variable string, which is name. Okay, so here, in order to use this string, in order to use this particular variable, you need to use a dollar sign. So dollar name, and then we need age, and age will be coming from this particular variable defined above. Okay, so again dollar sign and age. Now we have this function. This function will actually print the name of the person and the age as well, and the age and name variables are also defined. Now this is a blueprint. Now this doesn't contains the actual person values. It doesn't contain, for example, if your name is John, so it's not saying that your name is John. That's why it is called as a blueprint. Okay, now based on this one, what we will do is that we will create a actual person from it. So in order to create an actual person, we need to create an object of the class. Okay, so how we can do is that simply we say def person one is equals to new is a keyword followed by name of the class with the small brackets. So name of class is person, and here person with the small brackets. Now using this variable person one, so we say the name of the person one is equals to John, and similarly person one dot age is equals to, so the age is, for example, 26. Now using this so this is a blueprint, and this blueprint contains the properties and function, and based on that we actually created a actual object from here. Right now, once the object has been created, then what we need to do is that the third thing is that to call the object. So when we call the object, and basically what I'll do is that I will say person one dot show details, because why I am doing this here, because this function is basically printing the values. right? So now let's run this one and see what happens here. So it should print the values in the console. So let's go to the console over here, and you see that the name John and age 26 is printed over here, right? Now we have just created a single object, but we know that the purpose is that we can create as many objects as we can, right? So what I'll do is that simply let's create a person 2 or person 3 using this one, okay? And let me copy all this and let me scroll down and paste it over here. So instead of person 1, person 2, and I'll say testing Funda and age 30. So let's say age 30. So this is the name and age of the second person. And again here it would be person 2, and person 2. Now let's run this again and see what happens. And if I go to the console over here, so you see that name John, age 26, and the second one is testing Funda, age 30. So we can create as many objects we can create. So this is the idea of using the classes and objects. Just have a blueprint, and based on that blueprint, create the actual objects as many times as you want. Now, what are the key takeaways from this? So Groovy classes are really simple, just like you see that this is a very simple class with the properties. These are the properties, and this one is the functions or the method. Now, objects are created by simply using the new keyword followed by the name of class in small brackets. Okay, and we can create multiple objects and set values for them individually. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share, and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much, and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone, and welcome to this Groovy JMeter Tutorial Series. In this particular tutorial, we will learn about the constructors. So let's begin. In Groovy, a constructor is basically a special method used to initialize objects. And in our previous tutorial, we learned about the classes and objects, and we know that we create the object of the class. So this special method is invoked when an object of a class is created. Now, constructors allows us to set the initial state of an object when it is initiated. Okay? And if you don't provide a constructor, then Groovy will provide you a default one. And there are two type of constructors. One is a default one, and other one is a parameterized constructor. Now let's go to the JMeter and let's see what is the difference without using a constructor and having a constructor. So in our previous example, we actually write a class and create an object, but we didn't use the constructor. So first I will show you that one, and then we will write another code and where we actually write our constructor. So now let's go to the JMeter. So now we are in the JMeter, and in our previous tutorial what we did is that we created a class, and inside that class we have some variables which is name and age, and then we had this function which actually displays the name and age. And here we created the object, and when we were creating the object, so we were calling the properties basically. So we were giving the values for the name and age over here, and then we were displaying those particular attributes. Now here we didn't use the constructor here because we haven't initialized the value. So remember these lines of code from here, and now what I'll do is that I'll simply remove these lines of code from here, and inside the class here, when after defining that we okay, let me remove this one and let me add another JSR sampler over here, because I'm not sure why it's showing the small fonts, but no problem. We will go here and simply we say class and class person, and here in this class we need a string. So string, and we need a name, and we need a age, just like in our previous example. Now what we will do is that we will write a parameterized constructor, so which contains the parameters. Okay, so person, and this person will have a string name and integer age. So we are parameterizing this one with the name and age over here. And in order to refer the name for this one, so we will use the keyword called this dot name equals to name, and this dot age is equals to age. Now this is a very simple constructor here, and now just like in our previous example, let's create a function which will display a value. So display info, and this particular function will print, okay, just like in our previous example. So I will say print name and value in terms of the one which we are actually getting. So using the dollar sign and the curly braces, and inside this curly braces we would be passing the variable. Okay, so in the same way, age, and the age is again dollar curly braces age. So now this class is created with a constructor. So this is the highlighted part is basically a constructor over here. Okay, now previously what we did is that when we were calling, when we are creating a person object, then after creating an object, then we actually used to say that the person one dot name is equals to this, person one dot age equals to this. But when, because here we have initiated, so we don't need to do that practice. So what we will do is that instead we say person is equals to new person, and here, because this is a parameterized constructor, so when we are creating an object, right, so we need to pass those parameters. So here if I say in the double quotes John and comma age 30, and here you see that in previous example what I did is that I didn't provide this value. Instead what I did is that I wrote person one dot name equals to John, person one dot age equals to 25, and similarly for the other objects like person two dot this. But here I'm not doing in this way. So simply here I'll say person, because already I provided the values, initial values through the constructor, right? Initial state. So person dot, so I'm calling this function over here because it will actually display the value. So let me copy this one and paste it here. So when I actually run this one, it will print John and 30 in the console. So let's run this one, and if I go to console, so you see that name John and age 100, and this was the previous example where we didn't use a constructor, right? So when we talk about these constructor, the important points you need to remember is that if you do not provide a constructor in Groovy, then Groovy will automatically provide a default one. Okay, then second thing is that constructors are a good way to initialize complex objects with the parameters. And in JMeter, Groovy is often used for quick scripting tasks, and using constructors can help manage object initialization efficiently. So if I conclude today's tutorial, so we learned how to use constructor in Groovy within JMeter scripts. We explored both default and parameterized constructors and demonstrated how to initialize an object using a constructor in a JMeter test plan. So we understood how to use constructors help in organizing and managing data when working with the Groovy scripts in JMeter. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone and welcome to this Groovy JMeter Tutorial Series. In this particular tutorial, we will learn about the closures in Groovy. So let's begin. Closures in Groovy basically enables the functional programming. Now they are similar to the lambda expressions in Java and can be used as anonymous functions. And it will allow you to pass the behavior around in your JMeter scripts. Now when we talk about the closure, it's basically a block of code that can be assigned to a variable, passed as an argument, or executed at a later time. It provides a concise way to write the functions without explicitly defining a method inside a class. Now, how we can do this? So, just go to the test plan over here, go to add, go to threads, go to thread group, and here inside this one again, go add sampler, JSR 223 sampler, and now, as per the definition, we just learned that we will be writing functions without explicitly defining a method inside a class. So how we can do this? So simply the syntax is that we say def and we say greet. So we are not writing a class or method, right? So simply in the curly braces, right? So this is the very simple syntax for this one. And inside this one, what I can do is that simply I'll say print ln and print, I'll say hello. And now in order to use this one, simply we need to call this. Okay, just like calling a function, we'll be calling the closure. So here greet and here simply with the small brackets, just like a function or method, right? Now let's run this one and go to the console over here, and in the console it should print. So let me run this again, and yep, so you see that hello got printed in the console. Now when we talk about the closure here, in this particular example, a closure is assigned to a variable called greet, which can be executed later using this one, right? Now when we talk about the closures, so closures can accept parameters and return values just like methods. So how we can do this? So simply I will say greet user, and inside this one I will say okay, a string name lambda function or the arrow function print ln, and here I will say hello, and now hello with basically the name which we passed to this closure. Okay, so we can pass this as dollar sign and name, right? Now in order to call this one, so simply I need to pass a string value. So I'll say hello JMeter, right? And just run this one and see what happens. So you see that hello JMeter got printed over here, right? So we learned that how to define a simple closure, and we also learned that how to use the closure with the parameter. So this is a parameterized closure. And now what we can do is that we can use the closure which will return a value. Okay, so what it means that, so let me remove this one from here. So I will say there. So I will say this will actually give me a square. So here I will say num arrow function or arrow num into num. So this is how we calculate a square, right? So what I need is that I need to return this value. Okay, so I will say result is equals to, now result is equals to square and square of, let's suppose we say we need a square of 5. Okay, and we will say print ln and we will say print ln the result, right? So this is basically will return a value because we are saying that num is equals to num into num, right? So here we are passing a value 5. So 5 into 5 is basically a 25. So it should return a 25 value if we run this one. Let's go here and you see that the 25 is got printed. Now, when we talk about the difference between closure and the method, we have already seen the difference, right? So if I give you examples, so what I do is that let me write a function to add, okay, or the method to add. So what we do is that we simply say add and we say int a comma int b, and here inside this one I will say okay, you need to return a plus b, and then we can call this one. So we simply say print ln and add, and let's suppose add 3 comma 4. So this is how we can use a method. But in case of using the closure, how it will be different, so you will see the difference over here. So simply I will say that add is equals to def add is equals to need a closure over here, and here I will say a comma b arrow then a plus b, and simply I will say print ln and add 3 comma 4, right? So you see that this is a method. This is how we can define a method and call a method, and this one is the second one which is highlighted right now is basically a closure, right? So you can use the closure is the simpler way, and because we are not doing a full-fledged programming, so you can go with the closures when you are working with the JMeter scripting. Now if I run this one and let me change this value so we can see that what closure is printing. So go back here. So you see that 7 and 11. So the 11 value is being actually printed by this closure. Now, when we talk about the closures, so there are special closure features and closures as arguments. We can do that. We can also, so when we are using the JMeter and the context is a JMeter, what we can do is that we can log a message, right? So whatever the message we get on the runtime, we can log that one. We can create a reusable closure for the HTTP request, right? So how we can create the reusable closure for the HTTP request here? So what I will do is that I will say okay, def make request is equals to, and here inside this one, so I will say, so we need to create it once and use as many times as we want. So for example, tomorrow you want to make 100 HTTP requests, so you can do that, right? And here we say def con is equals to new URL. We need to pass the URL dot open connection, and then we say con dot set request method, and now we are setting the request method, and the method, for example, you want to go with the get. Okay, and I'll say return con dot get response code. So now the things are ready. So simply what you need to do is that you need to say def response code is equals to make. So now we need to make a request, right? So make request, and whatever the request we want to make over here, for example, we say https colon double slash example.com, right? And then we need to log the information, whatever we get. Log dot info, and we say what we need. We need a response. So we say response code, and the response code we will be getting on the runtime. Okay, so we say response code. Okay, so that's how, just an example, a dummy example, just to make you understand. So when you are working with a JMeter and you want to make a request through the JSR sampler, so you are writing a script, you are writing Groovy script to make the request. And when we are making a request, you and if you want to make hundreds of requests, so you don't need to write the code again and again. You just need to create a closure and use that closure. So this is an example just to hit the HTTP request. So obviously the APIs are the HTTP request, so you can utilize that in your script if needed. Now, in order to summarize today's session, basically, so what we learned is that we learned about the closures in Groovy, their syntax, and how to use them effectively in JMeter scripts. Closures provide a powerful way to write concise, flexible, and reusable code, making JMeter scripting more efficient. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share, and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much, and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone, and welcome to this Groovy JMeter Tutorial Series. In this particular tutorial, we will look into a real-time scenario where we need to generate a dynamic test data. So let's begin. In performance testing, generating dynamic test data is crucial to ensure the realistic test scenarios. In JMeter, Groovy scripting provides a powerful way to create the random test data such as names, numbers, emails, passwords, so on. Now for this particular tutorial, I am using a Request API. So for that, we need to go to the browser over here. So this is a website, and you need to scroll down here, and you will find this registration API. Click on this one, and this is the payload, this is the endpoint, and this is the base URL. So let's make this request in JMeter. Let's go to the JMeter over here, create, add threads, thread group, and inside that add sampler HTTP request. Now this is HTTPS, and then this is the host request.in. Copy this one, and now go back to JMeter. This is a post request, and now we need to provide a path. So this is the path /API/register. So copy this one and paste it over here. And inside the body, we need to provide a body over here. So go back. So this is the body. Copy this one and paste it over here. And let's name it as dynamic data. Dynamic data. Okay. And now, what I need to do is that I need to run this one. For that, let's add a listener. And before that, we need to add a HTTP manager. So using that, basically go to add, go to config element, HTTP header manager. Here, basically, we need to tell the JMeter that the content type is basically application slash JSON, because we are using a JSON here, right? This is a JSON. So let me move this up over here and add here. So we need to tell that the content type with the capital C, content dash type, and the content type is basically application slash JSON. So application slash JSON. Okay. And after adding this one, now let's run this one and see what happens. So we need to ensure that the request is working successfully. So request is working fine over here. So this is a request and this is a response we are getting. Now what we need to do is that we need to make it dynamic in nature by writing the Groovy script. Okay. So for that, we need to add the JSR223 sampler before that. So let's go here, sampler, JSR sampler, and we need this sampler before this request actually. So because we need to generate the test data before that, and then we need to pass this one, right? So we can either go with the preprocessor as well. So if I go here, just go to the preprocessor. Here we have a JSLR preprocessor, right? So instead of this one, so let me remove. So here add preprocessor and this one, right? And move it up here. And now what I need to do is that I need to import the Java utility random, and then what I will do is that I will randomly generate the email and password, because we have the two fields over here. You see that we have email and password. So what I will do is that simply I will say import java dot util dot random, and then def random is equals to new random. So creating an object. Okay. And now let's generate a random email. So I will say, let's create a variable called string email equals to, then I'll say user plus random, then dot next int, and here let's provide 10,000. So basically we are appending user with a random number, so it will actually make a random eval at the end, right? So then we say plus, then basically we say at the rate of, for example, gmail.com. Now what this will do is that this will actually generate the random email. So let's print this one, print ln and email, and run this one and go to the console. You see that user 2520 is generated. Then run this one again, 5522 generated. So we are seeing that we are generating a random email every time, right? So similarly, what I'll do is that let's, in a similar way, let's generate the password. So string password equals to, so I will say pass plus then random integer. So copy this part from here and paste it over here. And now again, let's print this one and see either we are getting a random password every time or not. So copy, paste, run this one and go here. So as you see that we got random password, random email here. Now what we need to do is that once we have generated the random email and password in the JMeter Groovy, so what we need to do is that we need to pass this into the API. So this is here we need to pass. In order to pass that, we need to use vars.put basically to utilize that as a variable inside a JMeter. So here what I'll do is that I'll say vars dot put, and here I'm saying random email. Okay, and here I need to provide the email. So basically we are creating this variable over here. Basically this is the variable, and whatever is basically generated, we'll putting this in this variable, and this variable we will be utilized here in our this particular JSON over here. Okay, that's why we are doing this one. Now what we need to do is that we need to do the similar thing for the password. So copy this, paste it here, and instead of email, let me say password, and here password. Okay, now we are good to go with this one, and simply we just need to pass this variable over here. So in order to pass this one inside the double quotes, we need a dollar sign, then curly braces, and then we need to provide the variable name. Again, dollar, curly braces, go here. This is a random email. So go here and provide this inside these curly braces. And similarly, for the random password, copy this one and paste it over here. Now we are good to go with the execution, and let's see what happens over here. So let's run this one, and request got executed, but we are saying that not only define user succeed decision, we are getting some error over here. And though we got successfully generated the username and the password over here, but due to some reason on the API level, it's not allowing us. But you can clearly see that the data is dynamically generated over here. We have successfully generated the username and email. So what I can do, maybe the problem here is that instead of double quotes, we will provide this one, but this will not work. So let's run this one. So yeah, this will actually not providing as a string. This needs to be in the string. So when this needs to be a string, so we need to put inside the double quote over here, right? So that's how you can utilize the Groovy to generate the dynamic test data in order to work with your APIs or requests, where you have to make it data driven, make it more realistic in terms of the performance testing. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone and welcome to this Groovy JMeter Tutorial Series. In this particular tutorial, we will look into a real-time scenario where we need to handle the session tokens. So let's begin. JMeter provides two key mechanisms to store and manage the data. One is variables and other are properties. Now, understanding how to read, write, and manipulate these using Groovy script is essential for effective test execution. But before that, we need to understand the difference between JMeter variables and JMeter properties. Now, in terms of scope, JMeter variable is on the thread group level and JMeter property is global. So this means that it can access across all the threads. And when we talk about persistence, so the variable basically lost after the thread ends. And in comparison, JMeter property is persistent throughout the test. You can modify the variable within the same thread, but in case of JMeter property, it can be modified globally. Now, in terms of accessing the variables, we will be using the was.get and was.put. And similarly, for the property, we will be using props.get property and props.set property. Now, using these concepts, I will demonstrate you the real-time scenario where we will be handling the session. So for that, what I'll do is that let's go to the browser over here. And for this particular tutorial, I will be using request.in. And here, just scroll down and you will find this login API. And this is the request, this is the payload, and in the response, we are getting the token. Now, what we will do is that we will extract this token, we will store it and use it globally. Now, let's go to the JMeter and see this practically. Let's go to the JMeter and inside the test pane, right click, add threads, thread group, and inside this one, again, add sampler HTTP request. Now, name this as login and just go back to the website. We need these details. So what I have done is that I have already written down all the details in the notepad for the easy execution. So the protocol is basically HTTP and this is our endpoint. So post call, this is a header, this is a body. Okay, let's go here and provide the endpoint, and this is HTTPS. And now if I go back, it's request.in basically. So let's copy and paste it over here and just copy this part and go back and paste it over here. So the method is basically a post, then just go to the body and copy this complete body. And now you see that this is a JSON. That's why we need to provide a header where we need to tell the JMeter that the content type is basically application slash JSON. Okay. Now go here and paste it over here. And once you paste it over here, now what we need to do is that we simply need to go again to the thread group, add config element, HTTP header manager. Just move this up over here and here go to add. Then again, just go back here. The content type is basically application slash JSON. Okay, just go here, provide this, and again go back, application slash JSON, provide this over here, and now we are good to go with executing this request. So simply go to add, then go to listener and just run this one and see if it's working fine or not. So you see that the login request got successfully executed. This was the request which we sent, and this was the response data, and we are getting this token. And you see that in the request, and these are the requested header, we are sending content type equals to application slash JSON, and in the response we have these response headers. Okay, now what we need to do is that we will be writing our Groovy script. But before that, what we need to do is that we need to extract this token. Okay, so we'll go to this response data, response body. So we need to extract this token so that we can pass this token globally. Okay, for this one, After the login, we need to add the post processor as a JSON extractor. Okay. And here, what you need to do is that provide the name of the variable. So I'm naming it as session underscore token. And simply I just providing the expression, and expression is dollar dot token. So it should extract the token from the login. Okay. And once you have extracted, so we are storing this into a session underscore token. Now inside this login, just go to add preprocessors and JSR223 preprocessor, and here we will be writing our script. Okay, so that we can store the token globally, right? So def token equals to vars dot get, and what we need to get here, session underscore token. Okay, so session with small s, and now I'm using if condition. If token, then what we need to do is that we say props dot set property, and here I will say global underscore session, and this is the token. So we are setting this to globally. Okay, and just for the confirmation, just log this information, log dot info, and here we say session token stored globally. So I just for the purpose of debugging in case we are not getting the token or something like that. Just that's why I'm logging this information. Okay, and here plus token. Okay, and this is not here. We need to put this over here, and now we need to close this bracket. Now what we have done is that we just got this variable and we are setting it as a global using the property. Okay. Now what we need to do is that let me remove this from here. Let me remove this one. And now let's create another thread group. Okay. And inside that, let's go to add, go to sampler, HTTP request, and let's copy the details, basic details from here. HTTPS, then this is HTTPS, and I have already written for the second API. And let's go back to the JMeter. It would be easier to copy the details from here, and then eventually the endpoint, and endpoint is this one. Okay, so we are just fetching the user which has a ID 2. Okay, so copy this one, go back here and provide this detail. Now I'm saying that name it properly, fetch specific user. Okay, now let's go here, and inside that what I'll do is that I will add a listener and just read this one. Okay, so this here we are getting that 404 request not found, and because in the request we are getting this one, so we need to go back because we have put it the path in the wrong way, and just go back over here. So this is the path slash API slash user slash 2. Okay, and put it over here. Now save this one and now run this one. So this time this this API should work, and in the response we are getting this information, right? Now, for example, here this API is working, but in the real time scenarios, what happens is that in order to execute this second API, we need to pass a token. So usually the token is passed in the headers. So let's demonstrate this thing. So what I will do is that I will go here and add config element as add HTTP header for this request. Okay. And here I will say, you know, token or authorization. Okay. Whatever the name you want or whatever is actually used in the API. So I will say authorization. And here, basically, I'm passing this global one. Okay. So in order to pass the global one, $, curly braces, double underscore property, okay, and the name of the property. So if I go here, so name of the property is global underscore session. Okay, copy this one, go back here, and we need to pass this inside this one. Okay, and now dollar curly braces, and again this is a curly small bracket, and then we have a curly braces. So dollar curly braces double underscore property global underscore session, and we are good to go. Now if I execute this one, so you will see this. Let me clear this one and run this again. And here, if I go to the request, basically, and go to the request headers, because I'm passing these headers. So in your case, it might be in the body, it might be in the headers, but usually this authorization token goes into the header. That's why I'm demonstrating here in the headers. So that's why I've actually passed it over here. Right? If I go to this one over here, request header, so you see that we are getting this over here. And this is possible because of setting it globally, because these are two different thread groups, right? And if I use the variable, it will never pass into the second thread group, because the scope of the variable is around this thread group, not in this group. We need a global access when we are working with the authorization. So if I go here in this first API, basically, if I go here and let me, what I do is that instead of doing this, let me remove this one from here and put a listener on the top of it so that we can see all the details over here. So it's a login. So if I go here in the response, I'm getting this QPW, something like that. And if I go this and go to the request header, so I'm getting this information. So basically in this way, you can handle the sessions globally so that there's no problem in terms of the authorization. And this is again a real-time scenario where you need to use a multiple thread groups, where you need to set the authorization globally. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone and welcome to this Groovy JMeter Tutorial Series. In this particular tutorial, we will learn conditional execution of the API calls. So let's begin. When you're working on the JMeter, there are so many scenarios where you need to execute the API based on the condition. Now, let's take an example where you need to execute a dashboard API based on the successful execution of the login API. Now, there is a condition. The condition is that when we have a successful login, then execute the dashboard API. Now, we need to handle these scenarios using the Groovy scripting. And for this particular tutorial, I will be using this request.in APIs. And let me show you. Let's scroll down. And here we have this login API. And it will return us a token. So we need to verify that, okay, either we can go with the status code or we can go with the token. For example, if the token has been returned, then in that case, we need to execute the other API. So we will pick any other API, for example, a single user. So we will hit the single user API when there is a successful login in case we have retrieved the successful token. Okay. Now just go to the JMeter. In JMeter, what we need to do is that just go to this test plan, right click, add threads, thread group. Inside this, add sampler HTTP request. Let me name it as login API. I have already written the details in the notepad, so let me go here. So this is HTTPS. This is the host. So this is the server name or IP, and this is HTTPS. This is the post call, and the path is basically /API/login. So copy this one, go back, provide this path over here, go to the body, and so this is the body. Just copy this body from here, go back, paste it over here. Now this body is the JSON, so we need to tell the JMeter that this is the JSON type. Okay, for that what we need to do is that go to the thread group, right click, add, then we need to go to the config element, then HTTP header manager. Now we will add this header. Let's move this up, and here we need to add content type is equals to application/JSON. Okay, so provide the name, then the value, and the value is basically application/JSON. Copy this one, paste this one, and now let's add a listener and run this one. This is a login which is successful, and in the response we are getting this token. Okay, now this API is working absolutely fine. Now what we need to do is that we need to add a Groovy script to check if the token is returned. Okay, so for that what I need to do is that after the login API, basically once after hitting the login API, I need a post processor JSR223 sampler where I will be writing this particular script. Okay, so now, but before that, what I need to do is that I need to extract this token. Okay, so for this I will say add post processors JSON extractor, and this will be after the login API. And once the token has been extracted, then I will be using a Groovy to check token and set the flag. Okay, so let's go step by step, and we'll also be using the if controller in this one. So what I'll do is that once I have this one, so simply here we need to provide a name of the variable. So I will say it's auth underscore token, and here we need to provide an expression. So simply $.token, and now what we need to do is that we need to write a Groovy script. Okay, so after this we need to add sampler, not sampler, post processors JSR223 post processor, and after this one here we need to write a code. So we say def token is equals to vars dot get, and what we need to get is basically auth underscore token, because we have defined this over here. Okay, so auth underscore token. Now I will be going with the if condition. So if token, then here log dot info, I'll say login successful, and then I'll say token received. Okay, and then if the token has been received, then I need to put this token. Okay, so vars dot put, and here I'm creating one more flag. So execute user detail API. Okay, and here is basically true. Okay, and once we are done with this, then we need to go with the else body here as well. Okay, so this is the if if API doesn't return the token, then what else? Okay, then else, and this is the else body over here, and then I will say log.info, login failed, no token received. Okay, so I will say this one we need to close. I will say login unsuccessful and no token received. And now in this case, I don't want to put, right? So in this case here, this statement will be actually false. So I don't want to put this one. Okay. So, so basically here, set flag to skip user detail API. So basically we are skipping over here. Okay. And we are setting a flag to execute the API. Okay. Once we have done this one, now we need a loop controller. Okay, so I will go with the if controller for this one. So go to the thread group, go to the logic controller, then we have this if controller, and after this one we have this if controller, and here what we need to do is that we say dollar, and we need to pass this one. Okay, because we are setting this equals to true in case the token has been received, right? So I will say this one is equals to, if this equals to true, okay, then you need to go to the other API call, execute the other API. Now the other API, which is a user API, needs to be inside this loop controller. So basically under this one, go to this one, go to HTTP request. Now here we need for the specific user API, specific user API, and let's go to my notepad, and this is the details. So let's go there and let me copy the basic information from here because this would remain same, and provide this over here, then request in, go here, provide over here, and then API slash user slash to copy this one, go back and provide this over here. Okay, now what happens is that let me remove this from here and add this on the test plan level. Okay, so right click over here, add, then listener users tree. Okay, now, what we need to do is that we have extracted the token, but we haven't passed that token to the other API. Okay, so here let's add HTTP header over for this one. So let me copy this one and paste it over here for this particular API, and we don't need this particular one. What we need is that we need the authorization. Okay, so I might have written this over here. Okay, no, so simply authorization is equals to bearer and dollar sign, and here we need to pass auth underscore token. Now let's run this one and see what happens. So simply run this one and go to view results tree. And strangely, we have seen only login API here, right? So in the response, we are getting token, but the execution of this API didn't happen. Now what we need to do is that we need to debug this one. So just go to thread group and go to add, go to sampler, add debug sampler, and now just run this again and see what happens. So let's go to the debug sampler, and we can see that we are getting the auth token, which is correct, and execute user detail API is equals to true. So this means that this particular block of code is working fine, which is the if statement. So eventually we concluded that there is some problem with the if controller. Okay. So now we need to fix this one. I have already written the correct expression for this one. So let's go to here. So this is the correct expression for this one, and go back and paste it over here. Okay. Now save this one, clean this one, and run this one again. And this time you see that this API got executed successfully, right? And now we need to ensure that our script is working fine or not. So I will intentionally, try to fail this one so that this API should not get executed. Okay. So I will go to this login API and let me change it over here. So let me say 2, 3 and save this one, clean this one, and run this one. Okay. So now you see that only login API got successful, and in the response we are not getting the token. And the reason why we go with the token, not the status code. So if I go here, so basically this is a request. So this is a response over here. The request is fine, right? It's actually creating the user. Okay. So that's why always choose something which will actually help you with the condition. Okay. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial.